The air raid siren wailed through the night, its piercing cry tearing through the silence of the Suffolk countryside. In the prisoner of war camp, Otto Reinhardt pressed himself against the cold stone wall of the barracks and closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. The sound of distant explosions rumbled like thunder on the horizon, where London was taking another beating from the Luftwaffe. Otto had never dropped a single bomb on England himself. He'd been shot down over the Channel during his third mission, his Messerschmitt spiraling into the cold waters before the Royal Navy fished him out, half-drowned and entirely defeated. Now, 6 months into his captivity at Camp 186, he'd come to a single conclusion: there was no place for sentimentality in war. "They're hitting London again," murmured Webber from the bunk below. Otto didn't respond. He'd learned to keep his thoughts to himself. As an officer, the other men looked to him, and he couldn't afford to show weakness. His father, a decorated veteran of the Great War, had taught him that much. Duty above all else. Germany above all else. There was no room for anything more personal. The barracks were cold despite the spring season, and Otto pulled his thin blanket tighter around his shoulders. He'd received a letter from his mother last week, heavily censored, of course, telling him that his younger brother had enlisted. Just 17. Otto had crumpled the letter in his fist before smoothing it out again and tucking it beneath his mattress with the others. In the morning, the prisoners assembled in the yard for roll call. The April sky was clear, belying the destruction that had rained from it hours before. Captain Morris, the British officer in charge of their section of the camp, strode down the line with military precision. His eyes met Otto's briefly, and there was something like respect there, between officers. But nothing more. They were enemies, after all. "Mail call after breakfast," Captain Morris announced before dismissing them. The mess hall was filled with the usual chatter, though Otto ate in silence. He'd given up expecting mail. His mother wrote when she could, but the letters were few and far between. Germany was being bombed too, after all. His father hadn't written at all. When his name was called during mail call, Otto was so surprised that for a moment he didn't move. "Reinhardt," the British corporal repeated, holding up an envelope. Otto stepped forward, accepting the letter with a nod. The return address was unfamiliar, somewhere in Texas. He frowned, turning the envelope over in his hands. He knew no one in America, let alone Texas. Later, alone on his bunk, he carefully opened the envelope and removed the letter inside. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. "Dear Lieutenant Reinhardt, you don't know me. My name is Teresa Martinez. I am a nurse at Harmon General Hospital in Longview, Texas. We've been treating wounded American soldiers here, and one of them, Sergeant James Cooper, told me about you. He was a guard at your camp before he was shipped to the Pacific. He said you helped save an English guard during an air raid when part of the fence collapsed. That you pulled him from the rubble when you could have run. I hope you don't mind me writing. With so much hatred in this world, I thought an act of decency deserved acknowledgement, even across enemy lines. Perhaps especially across enemy lines." Otto stared at the letter in disbelief. Sergeant Cooper. He remembered the American guard, a tall man with a Midwestern accent who had sometimes slipped the prisoners extra rations. The incident the letter mentioned had happened in January. A section of the perimeter fence had collapsed during a raid, crushing a young English guard. Otto had indeed helped dig him out, but not out of any great heroism. It had simply seemed the human thing to do. I've enclosed a small photograph of the Texas bluebonnets that bloom here in spring. They remind me that beauty persists, even in times like these. If you're permitted to write back, I'd welcome it. If not, know that someone across the ocean thinks of your kindness. *Respectfully. Teresa Martinez * Otto carefully removed the small photograph. A field of blue flowers stretched toward the horizon under a vast sky. Something tightened in his chest as he stared at it, a world away from barbed wire and air raid sirens. He should throw the letter away. Fraternization with the enemy was forbidden. Even if the United States had not been at war with Germany when he was captured, they certainly were now. Yet he found himself slipping the letter and photograph back into the envelope and tucking it beneath his mattress. That night, during an unusually quiet dinner, Captain Morris approached Otto's table and sat down across from him, causing a ripple of tension among the other German officers. "I understand you received mail from America today, Reinhardt," Morris said casually. Otto kept his face carefully neutral. "Yes, sir." "Unusual, isn't it? Having a correspondent in the United States." "I don't know anyone there," Otto replied truthfully. "It appears to be from someone who heard of an incident here at the camp." Morris studied him for a long moment. "The regulations regarding prisoner correspondence are clear." "Yes, sir. I'm aware. However," Morris continued, "we do permit reply letters, provided they pass through proper censorship channels." He paused. "The incident she mentioned, I remember it. Private Williams would have died if you hadn't helped dig him out." Otto shifted uncomfortably. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Morris said quietly. "They wouldn't have." He stood. "If you wish to reply, submit your letter to Corporal Bennett for review." For 3 days, Otto carried the letter everywhere, reading it when he was alone, studying the photograph of the Texas bluebonnets. On the 4th day, he sat down and began to write. "Miss Martinez, your letter was unexpected but welcome. Please convey my regards to Sergeant Cooper if you correspond with him. The incident he described was not remarkable. Private Williams was a young man, and I merely did what anyone might have done." Otto paused, pen hovering over the paper. What could he possibly say to this stranger? There were 1,000 things he couldn't write, about the war, about his position, about his thoughts on the conflict. Yet he found himself continuing. "The photograph of the bluebonnets reminds me of the cornflowers that grow in the fields near my home in Bavaria. My mother would gather them when I was a boy. I wonder if they still bloom there now. Life here is monotonous but not harsh. The English are correct in their treatment of us. We have food, shelter, and occasional diversions. Many of the men have taken up hobbies, carving, drawing, studying English. I read what books are available to us and try to maintain the morale of my fellow officers. If I may ask, what led you to become a nurse? It must be difficult work in these times. Respectfully. Otto Reinhardt *. He submitted the letter as instructed, expecting it to be heavily censored or rejected entirely. To his surprise, it was returned with only a few minor redactions and sent out the following day. 6 weeks later, Teresa's reply arrived, along with another photograph, this one of a simple white clapboard hospital building with a Red Cross flag flying above it. "Dear Lieutenant Reinhardt, I was so pleased to receive your letter. To answer your question, I became a nurse because my father is a doctor, and I grew up watching him care for our community. When the war came, it seemed the natural way for me to contribute. The work is indeed difficult, but rewarding. Our hospital specializes in orthopedic cases, men who have lost limbs or suffered serious bone injuries. Many will never be the same, yet their courage humbles me daily. They joke and tease and plan for futures I sometimes fear they may never have. I find myself learning more from them than they from me. You mentioned Bavaria. I've never been to Europe. Is it as beautiful as they say? I've lived all my life in Texas, except for my training in San Antonio. Sometimes I stand under our enormous sky and try to imagine what it must be like across the ocean, in places with such ancient history. I hope this letter finds you well, or as well as circumstances permit. Sincerely. Teresa Martinez. Otto traced his fingers over the neat handwriting. He tried to imagine the woman behind the words, a nurse in Texas, tending to broken men, looking up at an enormous sky, wondering about places she'd never seen. He found himself wanting to tell her about Bavaria, about the mountains and forests, about the village where he'd grown up, about his mother's garden and the creek where he'd fished as a boy. And so began a correspondence that would span months, passing through censors on both sides, yet somehow maintaining a connection that grew more personal with each exchange. Teresa sent photographs of Texas landscapes, of wildflowers and vast plains. Otto sent her small drawings he made of the Suffolk countryside visible from the camp, and once, a pressed cornflower that a sympathetic guard had brought him from outside. By autumn, their letters had grown longer, more revealing. Otto found himself confessing his doubts about the war, carefully phrased to pass the censors. Teresa wrote about her fears for her brother, who had been deployed to the Pacific, and her exhaustion from the endless flow of wounded men through her ward. In November, a letter arrived that changed everything. Dear Otto, I hope you don't mind my using your first name. After these months of correspondence, Lieutenant Reinhardt seems too formal for how I've come to think of you. I received word last week that my brother Michael has been wounded in the Philippines. They say he'll recover, but it has shaken me deeply. I found myself thinking of you, wondering if you have family who worry for you as I worry for Michael. It's strange, isn't it? How we can care for those we've never met. How the boundaries that nations draw seem to mean less and less as this terrible war grinds on. I've enclosed a photograph of myself, taken last month at my cousin's wedding. Perhaps it's forward of me, but I thought you might like to have a face to connect with these letters. I wish I could see yours as well. With warm regards. Teresa. Otto stared at the photograph for a long time. Teresa Martinez had dark hair that fell in waves to her shoulders, serious eyes, and a smile that seemed hesitant, as if unsure whether joy was permitted in such times. She wore a simple dress and stood beside a flowering bush, one hand raised to keep her hair from blowing across her face in the Texas wind. That night, Otto couldn't sleep. He lay awake, the photograph of Teresa hidden beneath his pillow, thinking about a world where people weren't separated by oceans and wars and barbed wire. For the first time since his capture, he felt the full weight of his imprisonment, not just the physical confinement, but the emotional isolation, the suspension of his life while the world continued without him. In the morning, he requested permission to have his photograph taken to send to his American correspondent. Captain Morris, who had been monitoring the exchange with guarded approval, agreed. The resulting photograph showed Otto in his prisoner's uniform, standing stiffly against the camp building, his expression serious but his eyes holding a warmth that had been absent in the official photograph taken upon his capture. As winter descended on the camp, bringing with it bitter cold and news of German defeats on multiple fronts, the letters between Otto and Teresa grew more frequent and more personal. They wrote of their childhoods, their hopes for after the war, books they had read, music they loved. Between the lines of their carefully censored exchanges grew something neither of them named but both increasingly relied upon. In February 1944, disaster struck. A new commanding officer was assigned to the camp, Colonel Richard Barton, a man who had lost his son at Anzio and who viewed the German prisoners with undisguised contempt. Otto was summoned to Colonel Barton's office one morning and found the man sitting behind his desk, Teresa's letters spread before him. "Lieutenant Reinhardt," Barton said coldly, "would you care to explain the nature of your correspondence with this American woman?" Otto stood at attention, his face carefully blank. "She is a nurse who heard of an incident at the camp, sir." We have exchanged letters through approved channels. Yes, I'm aware of the channels, Barton said, picking up one of the letters. What I'm concerned with is the content. These letters have become inappropriately familiar. Sir, you are a German officer, Reinhardt. An enemy of the Allied nations. This woman is an American citizen. This correspondence ends now. Otto felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The letters have been approved by the censors, sir. Under the previous command. Not under mine. Barton gathered the letters into a pile. These will be confiscated. Any further correspondence from this woman will be returned to sender. You are dismissed. Otto stood frozen for a moment before saluting stiffly and turning to leave. Lieutenant, Barton called after him. Don't mistake basic humane treatment for friendship. You're still our enemy. Remember that. For weeks, Otto heard nothing from Teresa. He wrote one final letter, explaining the situation as delicately as he could, but he had no way of knowing if it had been sent or destroyed. The silence was a physical ache, a hollowness that expanded with each mail call that passed without her familiar handwriting. In the barracks, he withdrew into himself. The other men noticed but said nothing. They had all lost things, homes, comrades, faith. They understood that something had been taken from Otto, even if they didn't know exactly what. Then came the news that changed everything. In April 1944, Otto was informed that he was being transferred to a camp in Canada. The Allies were reorganizing their POW systems in preparation for the massive influx of prisoners they anticipated would come with the invasion of Europe everyone knew was imminent. The night before his transfer, Captain Morris visited him in the barracks. I wanted to give you this personally, Morris said quietly, handing Otto an envelope. Otto recognized Teresa's handwriting immediately. Sir, I thought, Colonel Barton has been reassigned, Morris said. And I've always believed that small acts of humanity are what will help us rebuild after this madness ends. He paused. The transport leaves at 0600. Good luck, Reinhardt. Alone in the darkness after Morris left, Otto carefully opened the letter. My dear Otto, I received your letter explaining the situation with the new commander. I understand, of course, though it breaks my heart that our correspondence must end this way. These letters have meant more to me than I can properly express. In finding you, a supposed enemy, I have found a kindred spirit, a friend, and perhaps something more that I dare not name in these uncertain times. The war cannot last forever. When it ends, if you would consider it, I would like to send you a proper letter, one without censors, without restrictions. One that could reach you wherever you are and tell you all the things I've been unable to say. Until then, know that I think of you every day, and when I look at the Texas sky, I imagine that somewhere you might be looking at the same stars. Asterisk with deepest affection. Teresa asterisk Otto pressed the letter to his chest, feeling the first real hope he had experienced in years. The war would end someday. And when it did. The crossing to Canada was rough, the North Atlantic still wild with spring storms. Otto spent most of the journey below decks with the other prisoners, all of them wondering what awaited them in this new country, even further from home. The Canadian camp was larger than the one in England, situated in the vast emptiness of Alberta. Otto found himself assigned to a work detail on a nearby farm, harvesting wheat through the summer months. The work was hard but not unpleasant, and the Canadian farmer, a man named Reynolds, treated the prisoners with gruff fairness. In August, news reached them of the Allied landings in southern France. The German prisoners listened in grim silence. Their homeland was being invaded from all sides now. The end was coming, though no one could say how soon or at what cost. One evening in September, as Otto was returning to the barracks after a day in the fields, he was approached by a camp guard. "Reinhardt," the man said, "Major Williams wants to see you." Otto followed the guard to the administration building, wondering what the camp commander could want with him. He'd caused no trouble, had followed all regulations to the letter. Major Williams was a compact, efficient man who ran the camp with minimal fuss. He looked up from his desk as Otto entered. "Lieutenant Reinhardt, I've received an unusual communication regarding you." He held up an official-looking document. "It seems someone in the American Red Cross has taken an interest in your case." Otto's heart leapt. "The Red Cross, sir?" "A Miss Teresa Martinez has made inquiries about your welfare through official channels. As a Red Cross nurse, she's entitled to make such inquiries, though it's uncommon for individual prisoners." Williams studied Otto carefully. "She indicates that you assisted wounded Allied personnel during your time in England." "I helped dig out a guard who was injured during an air raid, sir." "Nothing heroic." "Heroism is contextual, Lieutenant." Williams set the paper down. "In any case, you're permitted to correspond with Miss Martinez through Red Cross channels. Their letters pass through different censorship protocols than regular mail." Otto could barely contain his relief. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. Thank the peculiarities of international law and a very determined American nurse." Williams almost smiled. "Dismissed." The letter from Teresa arrived 2 weeks later, bearing the Red Cross insignia. "My dearest Otto, I pray this finds you well. After your last letter and the news of your transfer, I feared we had lost our connection permanently. I cannot tell you what it took to navigate the bureaucracy of both our countries to locate you, or suffice to say I now know more about international prisoner protocols than I ever imagined possible. The war news changes daily here. Everyone speaks of an end coming soon, though no one knows exactly when. The hospital remains full, but there's a sense of looking forward now, of planning for after. Have you thought about what you'll do when peace comes? Where will you go? These questions consume my thoughts lately. My position at the hospital ends with the war, and I find myself at a crossroads I never anticipated. I hope you don't think me too forward, but I must tell you what is in my heart. These letters have become my anchor in a storm-tossed world. Your words, your thoughts, the person I've come to know through ink and paper, they mean everything to me. When this war ends, Otto, I would like to meet you. Properly, as two people free from the divisions of conflict. Is that something you might want too? Asterisk with love. Teresa asterisk. Otto read the letter 3 times before he trusted himself to reply. With trembling hands, he wrote back that same night. My dearest Teresa, your letter reached me today, and I cannot express what it meant to see your handwriting again. These past months of silence have been darker than I could admit, even to myself. What will I do when peace comes? I don't know. Bavaria may not be the same place I left. My family's fate remains uncertain. My last letter from my mother came nearly a year ago. My training was as an engineer before the war. Perhaps there will be much to rebuild. But your question strikes at the heart of all I've been thinking. When peace comes, the world will be remade. Old boundaries will matter less than the connections we forged across them. Yes, Teresa. I want to meet you. More than that, I want to know if what has grown between us through these letters could flourish in person, in a world without war. Asterisk with all my heart. Otto asterisk. Through the fall of 1944 and into the winter, their correspondence continued through the Red Cross channels. News of the war grew increasingly grim for Germany. The prisoners received reports of Allied bombing campaigns reducing German cities to rubble. Otto wrote to his family repeatedly but received no replies. In February 1945, Teresa's letter contained news that changed everything again. My dearest Otto, I've been reassigned. The army is consolidating medical units as they prepare for the final push into Germany, and the need for specialized nurses with my training is greater overseas than here. By the time you receive this, I'll be on my way to England, then to a field hospital that will follow the advance. I know what you must be thinking, that I'll be moving into your homeland as part of an occupying force. I wish there were another way for me to come to Europe, but this is the path open to me. The thought that I might be so much closer to you fills me with both hope and trepidation. The world is chaotic now, and becoming more so as the end approaches. But I hold on to the belief that when peace finally comes, we'll find a way to bridge whatever distance remains between us. All my love. Teresa. Otto sat on his bunk, the letter clutched in his hands, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Teresa would be in Europe, so much closer than Texas, but she would be moving through a Germany in collapse, a dangerous landscape of desperate last stands and bitter defeat. And yet, if Germany fell, if the war truly ended. In April, as spring thawed the Alberta plains, the news arrived that would alter the course of their lives forever. President Roosevelt was dead. Hitler had committed suicide in his Berlin bunker. Germany had surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. In the POW camp, the reaction was subdued. There was no celebration, no despair, just a collective exhalation, as if the men had been holding their breath for years and could finally release it. They were alive. They had survived. What remained of their homeland and their futures was unknown. Major Williams assembled the prisoners and explained that repatriation would be a lengthy process. Some would be returning to a Germany now divided among the victorious Allies. Others, whose homes were in territories now controlled by the Soviets, might need to be resettled elsewhere. Each of your cases will be reviewed individually, Williams explained. Those who have family connections in Allied nations may apply for sponsorship. Those with specialized skills needed for reconstruction may receive priority processing. 2 weeks later, Otto was called to the administration building again. He found Major Williams sitting with another officer he didn't recognize, an American, judging by his uniform. Lieutenant Reinhardt, Williams said, "This is Captain Richards from the U.S. Army Medical Corps. He's here about your case." Otto stood at attention, confused. "My case, sir?" Captain Richards stood, offering his hand. Otto hesitated before shaking it, still unaccustomed to being treated as anything other than a prisoner. "Lieutenant, I've been sent by the Red Cross Liaison Office regarding your repatriation status," Richards explained. "You've been designated for expedited processing under the Family Reunification Protocol." "There must be some mistake," Otto said. "I have no family in Allied territories." Richards and Williams exchanged glances. "Not yet, perhaps," Richards said carefully. "But we have a request for your transfer to England pending review of your status. The request comes from a Miss Teresa Martinez, attached to the 56th Field Hospital near Bremen. She has indicated her intention to sponsor your residency in the United States after demobilization, contingent upon, upon certain personal matters between you." Otto felt as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. "She wants me to come to England. Her unit is being relocated there as part of the drawdown," Richards confirmed. "She's petitioned through both military and Red Cross channels. Rather persistently, I might add." He smiled slightly. "Nurse Martinez appears to have friends in several administrative departments." "When would I leave?" Otto asked, his voice barely steady. "Processing takes time," Williams cautioned. but with the war over and your record clear of any war crimes accusations, we could have you on a transport within a month. A month. After years of captivity, a month seemed like nothing at all. The June morning dawned clear and warm as Otto stood on the deck of the transport ship approaching the English coast. He wore a simple civilian suit provided by the Red Cross, his few possessions packed in a small valise. Around him, other former prisoners, some bound for repatriation, others, like him, with more complicated destinations, gazed toward the white cliffs growing larger on the horizon. At Southampton, the processing seemed interminable. Forms to sign, officials to speak with, papers to be stamped. Otto moved through it mechanically, his mind fixed on what awaited beyond the bureaucracy. Finally, a Red Cross worker approached him. "Lieutenant Reinhardt? If you'll come with me, please." She led him through the processing center to a small waiting room. "Someone will be with you shortly," she said with a smile, closing the door behind her. Otto set down his valise and moved to the window, looking out at the harbor. England again, where his captivity had begun. But this time it was the gateway to freedom, to a future he had not dared imagine when his plane spiraled into the Channel years ago. The door opened behind him. "Otto?" He turned slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. Teresa Martinez stood in the doorway, still in her nurse's uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a simple knot. She was smaller than he had imagined, her face more delicate, her eyes wider and brighter. But her smile, that same hesitant smile from the photograph, was exactly as he remembered. "Teresa," he breathed, and then she was across the room and in his arms, and all the words they had exchanged over years of letters seemed simultaneously inadequate and unnecessary. When they finally drew apart, Teresa kept her hands on his arms, as if afraid he might disappear. "I can't believe you're really here." "Because of you," Otto said. "They told me what you did, the strings you pulled." She smiled, brushing away a tear. "It turns out treating generals' sons gives a nurse certain advantages when it comes to requesting favors." They sat by the window, hands entwined, as Teresa explained what would happen next. Her discharge from the Army Nurse Corps would be finalized within weeks. Otto's case had been reviewed, and as a prisoner with no Nazi Party affiliations and a record of humane conduct, he had been cleared for emigration. "My father has arranged a position for you with an engineering firm in Dallas," Teresa said. "It's not Bavaria, but it's where you'll be," Otto finished. "That's all that matters now." Teresa reached into her pocket and withdrew a small, weathered envelope. "I've carried your first letter with me across an ocean and through a war zone. The cornflower you sent fell apart long ago, but I saved every petal." Otto touched her cheek gently. "I kept your photograph under my pillow every night. The guards knew. They pretended not to see." "And now?" Teresa asked softly. "Now that we're here, together, after all this time, what do you want, Otto?" He took both her hands in his. "In my darkest moments as a prisoner, I convinced myself that there was no place for love in wartime, that duty and survival were all that mattered. You changed that. Your letters showed me that even in humanity's darkest hour, connection is what saves us." Teresa's eyes shone with tears. "Is that a yes?" Otto smiled. "It's a yes to whatever you're asking. To Texas, to a life together, to everything." On a bright September morning in 1945, as autumn painted the Texas landscape in gold and crimson, Otto Reinhardt and Teresa Martinez were married in the small white chapel in Longview. Her father, the doctor, gave her away. Her brother Michael, still recovering from his wounds but standing tall in his dress uniform, served as best man. Otto wore a new American suit, his German accent already softening around the edges after months in Texas. Teresa wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, with a bouquet of cornflowers and bluebonnets, the flowers of two homelands now joined. In the front pew sat an unexpected guest, Captain Morris, the British officer from Otto's first POW camp, now demobilized and touring America before returning to Suffolk. "I wouldn't have missed it," he told them at the reception. "Not after carrying those letters back and forth for so long. I felt rather invested in the outcome." As evening fell and lanterns were lit in the Martinez garden, Otto led Teresa in their first dance as husband and wife. Around them, Americans who had fought against his countrymen raised glasses in celebration of their union. The war that had brought them together was over. The peace they had found with each other was just beginning. "Do you ever think about how unlikely all of this is?" Teresa murmured against his shoulder. "A German pilot and a Texas nurse." Otto held her close, remembering the barbed wire, the censored letters, the nights of uncertainty. "It started with a single act of decency," he said. "Helping dig out that young guard. And then your letter arrived. Proof that even in the worst of times, humanity can surprise us," Teresa said. Later, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, a drive through the Texas Hill Country, Otto pulled Teresa aside and handed her a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "What's this?" she asked, unwrapping it carefully. Inside was a journal, bound in leather, its pages filled with Otto's neat handwriting. "Every letter I wanted to send you but couldn't," he explained. "Every thought the censors would have struck out. Every hope I had for us that I was afraid to commit to paper." He touched her cheek gently. The uncensored story of how a Texas nurse's letter to a German POW changed everything. Teresa clutched the journal to her chest, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I love you, Otto Reinhardt." "And I love you, Teresa Reinhardt," he replied, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue. As they drove away, tin cans rattling behind their borrowed Chevrolet, the Texas sunset painted the sky in colors no war could dim. Ahead lay a future neither could have imagined when the world was aflame, a life built on words that had crossed enemy lines and found their way home.